Kim Hyung-jin when he was at the Washington Korean Embassy, and Dr. Choi Gang when he was at the Blue House. They never leaked anything to me, but they gave me great insights on what to write about, and I hope sometime later they can leak me some stories so I can scoop it up. Before actually I start, I just wanted to, I noticed a disclaimer by Dr. Choi. The views and ideas in my speech today are just mine and do not represent official standpoints of the Joseon Daily newspaper or the Korean government. I just want to make quick comments on Dr. Cha's presentation. He mentioned that China is not ready to play the role of G2. I want to just ask him, then how can we make China to play that role if that's necessary? On Dr. Choi, he mentioned about the political stabilization in North Korea is gonna go on for a while. I disagree a little bit because recently Joseon Daily newspaper commissioned a couple of people to go inside North Korea and film whatever's happening inside North Korea. And lo and behold, we were able to get a very clear, crisp pictures, video clips of what's happening in North Korean markets. All these films were actually done by North Korean officials, whether you believe it or not. And my sense is that North Korean governmental organizations throughout like the countryside, except Pyongyang, is probably all broken down. And what this means is that, and I have heard numerous cases that the South Koreans were actually going to China to meet their families unofficially, bringing these family members to China by simply bribing the North Korean security officials, and they were able to talk to them. So if this is happening, probably maybe the political institution is still intact, but if the social institution is crumbling, then maybe we are seeing the beginning of the downfall of the North Korean regime, so we maybe have to prepare for that. Another one on Ambassador Revere, he mentioned about the soft power. Yes, we do have great soft power, but the problem with soft power, as Dr. Joe Nye of Harvard said, is that soft power travels far enough when it's backed by hard power. So how do we enhance our soft power in North Korea, because we don't have any foothold there. Another thing I want to mention today is we never talked about the what's going to happen next in South Korea after these two attacks by North Korea. One was on, well, we had an asymmetrical attack in Cheongnam incident, symmetrical attack on Yeonpyeong, artillery incident. Many in the intelligence circle worried that North Korea might come in an asymmetrical attack again next time, like maybe a terrorist attack or so on subways or airports and so on. And if that happens, I see what's going to happen. We're going to spend another 3 months trying to figure out who did it, what's going to happen and so on. And then maybe 6 months later, okay, we conclude North Korea did it. By that time, we already lost the timing. So then, the North Korea will come again with another tactics, and we'll be just keep on following them around. So what are we going to do? Another issue I want to raise is about China. Some South Korean officials think that, maybe having 7th Fleet permanently stationed in 평택 is a good thing for Korea, because Chinese will probably notice what's going to happen. I mean, they would hate to see 7th Fleet sitting on their nose and surveying what's going to happen in Beijing and Pyongyang and so on. So that's another issue I want to raise. And probably we never talked about Japan issue today, and hopefully somebody talk about how to engage Japan in this situation could be helpful. Lastly, I've heard from somebody, a U.S. official, that South Korea seems not to be ready on how to deal with this issue. I completely agree, because we are no Israel. In order for us to escalate, we have to have the gut to to go to war, but we don't seem like we have. I mean, nobody wants war in Korean Peninsula. I don't think if a beggar and a gentleman fights, then the gentleman always loses because beggar has nothing to lose. We're probably in the same situation. So nobody wants to have a war. But unless we are willing to go to war, I don't think we can, or unless we stand up to this bully, I don't think we can actually stop North Korea from making any further attacks. So we just have to figure this out. And as a measure of token, our government is staging the civil defense exercise today at 2 p.m. for the first time in many, many years. I'm not sure whether this is maybe it's a good start, but I'm not sure whether this will be enough for us to be aware of what's going on. Anyway, all these things are easier said than done. Hopefully somebody come up with a good solution and we can build up from here. Thank you very much.
Patrick Roney.
President Lee, thank you very much to you personally, but also to the East Asia Institute for these splendid surroundings, for this outstanding turnout of experts, and also for organizing the civil defense drill when I speak this afternoon at 2 o'clock. Let me apologize to our three outstanding presenters on this panel because they already have an enviable list of questions to answer, and I'm only the second discussant. So I hope they have a long list of questions that they can make, and I'll try to keep it short and integrative. The topic of this panel, indeed, as you pointed out, President Lee, is looking at the regional security environment and how it's changing, and I think we've heard an appropriate focus on the reemergence of China and the difficulties of managing a belligerent, proliferating North Korea in leadership transition. And those really are, I think, at the center of what involves this region, even while Evans Revere is absolutely right to take the broader global view, because ultimately the US-ROK alliance and relationship more broadly is about building both at a regional level and a global level an international rules-based system of free trade, and thank goodness CORUS is now moving forward, almost forgotten in the midst of tensions, and that it's also based very much on democratic values. And I think I want to ask a couple of questions really related to how then to engage China and work to deter, check, and halt North Korean aggression, if necessary, in light of this. North Korea, in many ways, could be said to acting like that spoiled child that Hu Yafei, the Vice Foreign Minister of China, was said to have told American officials last year. Because North Korea wants to involve China in order to involve the United States. In other words, an indirect approach, because North Korea was not happy that Washington was not fully listening or listening in the way that North Korea wanted. At the same time, you could say that the United States has been heavily focused on pressuring China to change North Korean behavior. And so there's a certain symmetry of shadow boxing going on, and I'd be very interested in the opinions of all three speakers really on this issue, as on a related second question, which involves how to, in what we can expect from trying to get China to help put pressure on North Korea. And I think Victor Cha has laid out a great intellectual framework for thinking about this. In some ways, both the United States government and the Chinese government can be said to have dashed expectations over the past couple of years. That is, the United States, the Obama administration, started off with great expectations about what they could do by way of strategic partnership with China. And in many ways, some progress seemed to be coming based on, again, released cables. Last year, there was a certain bonhomie and candor in relations of high-level discussions. And yet, as Deputy Secretary Steinberg leads a delegation to China today, that relationship is troubled, even on the eve of a visit by Hu Jintao that presumably China and the United States both want to go successfully. Russia has strongly condemned the shelling of Yanpyeong. That has to be embarrassing. Shouldn't it be embarrassing to China? Japan has stood up, it's overspoken, but at the Trilateral Foreign Ministers meeting in Washington, it appropriately gave 100% support to South Korea. And that's an important statement. So where is China in all of this? So I guess the question is, literally, what is the strategy now for embarrassing China or persuading China that it has missed its interests, it's miscalculated its interests by not being part of this pressure movement against North Korean belligerents? And then finally, a question just related to Evans Revere on the soft power. It seems interesting that the economic markets in South Korea have not been moved at all by the tensions of recent weeks, months of this year of provocation. And I think that's good. I think that shows a certain degree of resilience and resolve. On the other hand, how do we make sure that we can use our economic and full soft power influence to persuade North Korea to change some of its path, including its obvious military provocations, especially those that sink ships and kill people, both military and civilian, that proliferate weapons of mass destruction on and off the peninsula? How do we work on containing what we would call limited or local war efforts on the part of North Korea? That's part of their strategy. They've gone beyond brinkmanship and propaganda to actual limited uses of deadly force and even local war. And they're continuing to build their nuclear program, their missile program, and provide nuclear and missile assistance off the peninsula. Somehow our great economic soft power mixed with our hard power is not fully containing those activities that are undermining that international system, both regionally and globally, that this alliance is all about. So I know it's a tall order, but those are my comments. Thank you.
I am very hesitant to pile on more questions to an already long list, so I think I'll just offer a few comments, try to be rather quick about it, and then let the other discussants talk about it. I think it's important to examine the nexus between China and North Korea when it comes to the United States and ROK alliance. That the message that I've been sending, that friends and colleagues have been sending to Chinese, both privately and publicly, has been that North Korea's belligerence, North Korea's aggression is directly counter to Chinese long-term interests. Is that these actions that North Korea has been undertaking is doing many things, is causing a reaction that is very much not what we imagine China would not want to see. It's bringing the United States, South Korea, and Japan closer together in a way that we probably would not have been able to do without such belligerence. It's increasing U.S. presence throughout the region, both militarily and otherwise. It's hurting China's relationships with the ROK and the United States, and forcing China to ask itself, I think in a more fundamental way, is North Korea really more important to China than the United States, South Korea, and the rest of the international community? Because it's driving itself to have to make that decision. And it's not a decision that they would like to make. But these are the dynamics of, this is the road that we're going down with these problems. I'd like to have some comments on specifically on the three presentations that we got. Hopefully not to ask a question, but I don't know if I'll be able to stop myself. First on Victor Cha's presentation, I thought was very helpful, very clear analysis of China's rise. I especially like the question and the three answers of how's the international system going to deal with China, with the rise of China. But I would submit or suggest that while the answers are right, definitely I'd say exactly right, I would suggest maybe the question needs a little bit of an adjustment. Because I don't think it's a question of what the international system is going to do. I think it's a question of what China is going to do when it comes to the international system. And I think if you look at the answers are really about how is China going to use its power? And I think that's the great question of the 21st century, at least the early 21st century. And the answers to these questions, whether it's offensive realism, defensive realism, or neoliberal, the answers lie in Beijing, not in the UN, not in Washington, and not in Geneva. So I think the answer lies in Beijing. I think for Kang Choi's presentation, I thought it was very good, in part because it is very similar to a report that I'll be releasing later this week on the same questions. I think one of us was reading each other's mail. I'm not sure who, but I thought it was very helpful. I think I'd like to ask a question. I'd like to ask Kang Choi to expand on a point that he made towards the end of his presentation. It was a rather striking to me. It was a very good presentation. But towards the end, you said, talking about policy alternatives, your last point was that we must rethink the foundation of national defense. Thank you very much. That's a very big point and a very important point. So I'd like to ask you to expand on that thought a little more, dig deeper into it, and tell us what you thought about it. For Evans Revere's presentation, very much appreciated the discussion on global public goods, especially as you define them. I'd like to ask you to focus a little bit on counterproliferation. Have our efforts, the international community's efforts, to contain North Korean proliferation, have those efforts failed? We've seen what's happened in Syria. We've seen reports about what's happening in Burma. Have those efforts failed? If so, where is the leak? And what's the fix? For that, again, thank you, everybody. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Seok Han. I'm a Yonsei University professor, and my major is Chinese studies. So thank you very much for Professor Victor Cha for your excellent presentation. So I'd like to comment on President Cha's the presentation. I'd like to point out three things. The first thing is, as Dr. Denmark said, that it's excellent explanation about how international system has to respond to the rise of China, offensive realism, defensive realism, neoliberal realism, and also Professor Cha mentioned about Chinese public opinion and elite opinion about the rise of China. But I think we have to understand the Chinese perspective, how Chinese people they understand this kind of mixed signals. So I think as on top of Dr. Denmark's opinion, I think it's better. It's not a good idea to wait until China decide their own behavior or their response to the rise of China. It's better for us to maybe United States has to give them a guideline. This is what we think about the rise of China. So I think my preference is you have to behave like this. This would be a better way. I think from my observation, China is still, they have their own conviction, but they're still waiting for the signals from the United States. Second thing is, I think Chinese worldview has been changed since the financial crisis, world financial crisis in 2008. From my observation, before 2008, world financial crisis, Chinese worldview is only divided two states, United States of America and the rest of the world. That means that from Chinese perspective, their perception of the United States would be a remote and advanced, and we're never going to catch up with them. But 2008 world crisis, the financial crisis, gave them a sign that, oh, U.S. is not a remote advanced country. We can catch them up. That will be a differences of their perception. So reflecting that kind of perception, they try to behave, or they try to change their own perception toward the world and toward the United States. But this does not mean that they've already changed their perception or their behavior to the United States. Their behavior to the United States is still remained intact. And I think one of the things is a couple of days ago, the Foreign Minister of China, Yang Jiechi, he mentioned that the U.S. and China relationship should be cooperative, and U.S. and China should be on equal basis, equality between the two countries. He just emphasized on that. I think that comment shows me that Chinese perception or Chinese attitude toward the United States would not be changed much. But their regional behavior has been changed a lot. I think in one word, if I just comment on this, assertive. If we take a look at their behavior in the South China Sea, and their behavior in the Senkaku and Diaoyitao Island, and their perception toward the Yeonpyeong Island and Cheongnam incident, I think we can tell that their behavior has been assertive. I think that is pretty much reflective of their rise of China. And I think that is a part of concern that we have to address. Third thing is the Sino-North Korean relationship. Many people are concerned that why China, they have to protect the North Korea instead of they just put their back onto the world community and then the rest of the world. I think Chinese people, from their perspective, they believe that the rise of China is reflected on this part. We are much better than before. In the past, our situation was much worse than we still maintained the North Korean relationship. But now we are very strong country, and we are expecting to be the #1 country in the world, and why we have to give up North Korea. That kind of perception is residing at the bottom of their mind. Second thing is, I think that they found a new strategic value of North Korea. Maybe conventional kind of strategic value would be buffer zone of North Korea, but recently they tried to add one more value would be North Korea might be useful as a great leverage against dealing with the United States. So I think these two things would be the basis of their own perception toward North Korea. So my final consequences would be China never going to give up North Korea. I think one of the big change has been uttered in summer of 2009. Right after the second nuclear test of the North Korea, Chinese people, they sit down and they think about what will be our future the policies toward North Korea. And they just had a lot of debate. And some people, they talking about we have to go for traditional views, and some other people, we have to change our views to North Korea, and we have to change our policy toward North Korea. But their final conclusion would be they want to remain as a traditional view, but they want to divide Chinese kind of nuclear issue and the Chinese kind of belligerent issue should be one thing, but still they want to maintain very stable Sino-North Korean relationship. That is their policies. So after that one, their first behavior is Won Jabao's visit to North Korea, and Won Jabao, he's just commented and he just behaved that we have to strengthen our relationship with North Korea. At the same time, we want to expand our economic relationship with North Korea. And afterward, we just witnessed the Yeonpyeong Island and Cheongnam incident and what they behave. Still, Chinese people, they want to find out any big clue and big excuses that to not to bother North Korea. And at the same time, they want to just persuade outside the world not to intervene into North Korea. I think that will be the bottom line of North Korea's Chinese policy toward North Korea, and I think that will be the one thing that we have to clearly address between the United States and China, United States and Korea. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to address an important issue of today. I really appreciate the East Asia Institute and the Center for New American Security to present my view on this important issue. I'd like to comment on three subjects rather than asking any specific questions, because these three issues seem to be related together. First, China's rise. People often talk about G2 and expect a big role from China for international obligations. And analysts say China can become a revisionist power, considering They got a lot of humiliation and deprivation from foreign countries in the 19th and 20th century. But China has been a beneficiary of international economic system after 1945, and China has been a power for maintaining status quo rather than breaking status quo, and it seldom waged expansionary military campaign. And what I think is that China can become an important partner in dealing with North Korean threat. President Bush recently published a book, Decision Point, and he said he talked about a meeting with President Hu Jintao. When he met with President Hu Jintao, he asked President Hu, "What keeps you up at night?" And President Bush's answer is another terrorist attack on America. But President Hu's answer is creating 25 million jobs a year. Because it has been really important for Chinese government to keep rapid economic growth for their legitimacy. They tend to cooperate for international peace and stability. In terms of relationship between China and the United States too, North Korea and Iran have been the issues for cooperation, while human rights, Taiwan, currency exchange rate, trade imbalance, and the transparency of defense spending has been a contentious issue between the two countries. I think North Korea's threat is increasing because of the three factors. They disclosed their uranium enrichment facility recently, and they now have two programs, plutonium program and enriched uranium program. And they are also working on ICBM missile capability, and they are showing provocative actions probably related to power succession in North Korea. When we look back on history of the power succession of Kim Jong-il, he became the member of Politburo in February 1974 and became standing member of Politburo in October 1980 and the Supreme Commander of People's Army in December 1991 and chairman of National Defense Committee in April 1993 and the General Secretary of Korea Workers' Party in October 1994. And in the process of his power succession, North Korea showed provocative actions like killing of American soldiers in Panmunjom with axes in August 1976 and killing of Korean delegation members in Rangoon, Burma in October 1983, and the bombing of Korean Airlines flight in November 1987, and sending a submarine to Gangneung in September 1996. This shows that in the process of Kim Jong-un's power succession, North Korea may show provocative actions in the future term. And another thing we have to consider is inherent internal instability in North Korea. Kim Jong-un's birth year is uncertain. Somebody says it is 1984, some says it is 1983, 82. But it may be hard to accept 27-year-old Kim Jong-un as the supreme leader of North Korea. Even the North Korean people are aware of what is happening in the outside world. That is shown in the reform of currency in November last year, North Korean government tried to abolish market, but because of the opposition from the people, North Korean government withdrew the idea of reform the market. And here in Seoul, some North Korea specialized internet news companies have stringers inside North Korea, and those stringers are giving out information of what is happening inside North Korea to the outside world. And recently there was a report that North Koreans are watching Korean movies and television dramas, and hairstyle of Song Seung-hun and Song Hye-kyo, famous Korean actor and actress, were in vogue and were controlled by the North Korean authorities. And North Korea is facing chronic food shortage. WFO and FAO said North Korea will be short of 540,000 tons of food over the next year. And moreover, they have economic difficulties. The difference between economic power between North Korea and South Korea and between North Korea and China is increasing, and that will give pressure on North Korean leaders. North Korea has been like a skillful poker player. They have been unpredictable, but they have been rational in a sense. They made many bluffs, but they were seldom called bluffs. Like for example, when they say they finished reprocessing spent fuel rods, it was technically impossible that they could finish that in so short a time. And people tend to doubt what North Koreans were saying. But as time goes by, they carried out what they said in public. And it is kind of double deception. When they first said something, people don't believe it. And those doubt remains even if they actually carried out some professed threat. About the ROK-US alliance, we are now moving beyond the Korean Peninsula. Last year in June, a joint vision statement was agreed between the two presidents, and this year in October, defense cooperation guideline was agreed in the meeting between the two defense ministers. It reminds me of what I read in New York Times, a short article by Thomas Friedman. He went to a golf school to improve his short game, but in the end, he improved his long game. What is happening in our alliance is we are trying to broaden our relationship so that we'll not put all the eggs in one basket, so that our cooperation in one area will not affect the whole relationship. But in the end, our cooperation and coordination on North Korean policy has become more stronger. And one result was trilateral foreign ministers meeting last week in Washington, D.C. As security environment in Northeast Asia is changing, For example, North Korea's nuclear threat is becoming more real, and it may lead to more close cooperation among Korea, United States, and Japan, and those countries may work more closely on missile defense or developing conventional arms. And second, North Korea's internal instability gives big tasks to these countries, and they are coming up with responses. All these things may give some incentives to China to see the situation from a new perspective. China has been focusing on maintaining the status quo. But if North Korea's threat continues, status quo cannot be maintained, and China has to have more role in suppressing North Korea's threat and provocative actions and change their policy so that North Korea can follow China's example. That is where we can be helpful. Thank you.
이제 한미동맹이 당면한 세 가지 중요한 과제에 대해서 먼저 제 생각을 간단하게 말씀드리고 미국 측 발표자들에게 질문 하나씩만 하도록 하겠습니다. 최강 박사님 발표에서 이미 대충 얘기가 됐습니다만은 저는 지금 한미동맹이 당면한 시급한 과제를 3개 정도로 생각을 하고 있습니다. 첫 번째는 북한발 안보 위협에 대비하는 건데 이때 말하는 안보 위협은 재래식 위협과 핵 두 가지 모두를 포함하는 겁니다. 북한의 안보 위협 금년의 초에 천안함 사태와 또 최근에 연평도 폭격을 당하면서 북한의 재래식 위협이 사실은 핵보다도 더욱 시급한 그런 위협이다 하는 것이 분명하게 드러났습니다. 그런 의미에서 한미 양국이 이 동해상 그리고 서해상에서 연합훈련을 통해서 북한의 도발을 더 이상 좌시하지 않겠다는 그 강한 시그널을 북한에 보내고 또 중국에 대해서도 메시지를 보낸 것은 아주 바람직한 그런 대응이 아니었나 생각을 합니다. 그리고 최근에 한미일 3국이 워싱턴 DC에서 3국 외무장관의 회담을 통해서 6자 회담에 대한 입장을 조율한 것도 이 북한의 안보 위협에 대응하는 효과적인 방법이 아니었나 이렇게 생각을 합니다. 두 번째 과제는 이 북한 체제의 불안에 대비하는 겁니다. 발표에서도 나왔습니다만은 북한이 지금 후계 3대 세습, 후계 체제를 구축을 하려고 하고 있는데 문제는 김정일 이후의 상황입니다. 김정은의 권력 체계가 공고화되기 전에 김정일이 사망할 경우에 과연 내부적으로 권력 투쟁이 없겠는가, 또 식량난이나 경제난으로 인한 사회적 혼란이 없겠는가, 여기에 대한 그 준비가 필요한데 문제는 북한의 그런 사태가 발생할 경우에 한국, 중국, 미국 이 특히 세 나라 간에 어떤 식으로 또 어떤 절차에 의해서 북한에 관여하게 될지 여기에 대한 협의가 필요하다 하는 그런 얘기입니다. 세 번째 시급한 과제는 그 중국의 부상에 따른 한미 양국의 그 대중국 정책에 대한 공감대가 있는가 하는 그런 문제입니다. 특히 금년 들어서 이 중국의 대외 정책은 과거에 소위 그 도광양해라고 알려진 그 소극적인 자세에서 이제는 굉장히 공세적인 자세로 전환을 했습니다. 센카쿠 열도 문제에서 보든가 혹은 남중국해를 자신의 그 핵심 국가 이익이다. 그래서 이 문제에 관해서 타협은 없다. 이렇게 선언한 중국의 태도를 볼 때 중국의 그 대외적 전략에서 굉장히 큰 변화가 금년에 보였습니다. 또 시진핑 그 차기 지도자인 시진핑이 한국 전쟁의 참전은 정의로운 전쟁이었다. 이렇게 인식을 하면서 이 북한에 대해서 결국 후견인 역할을 포기하지 않을 것이다. 이런 메시지를 우리에게 줬습니다. 그런 거를 감안할 때 한중 관계가 굉장히 서먹해지고 그래서 미국과 한국 간에 과연 그런 중국을 어떻게 대하는 게 옳은 방법인가? 중국을 더욱 압박하는 것이 좋은 방법일지, 혹은 그런 중국과 협력을 강화하는 것이 효과적인 방법일지, 여기에 대한 한미 양국의 공감대가 아직까지는 확실하지 않은 그런 느낌을 받습니다. 그렇기 때문에 이 세 가지 문제에 대해서 저는 한미 양국이 시급하게 정책적인 협의를 강화해야 된다고 그렇게 생각합니다. 그런 제 생각을 잠깐 말씀드리고 나서 저는 미국 측 발표자들에게 질문 한 가지씩만 하도록 하겠습니다. 먼저 빅터 차 교수께서 중국을 보는 여러 가지 그 시각을 말씀드렸는데 최근 중국의 부상을 보는 미국의 시각에서도 서서히 인내심이 좀 부족하다는 그런 느낌을 받게 됩니다. 그 말은 곧 미국이 오바마 정부 출범 초기에는 굉장히 포용적인 자세로 이제 중국을 대했지만 특히 이제 중간 선거 패배 이후에 보수적 그 변화를 하게 되면서 미국의 중국 정책이 오펜시브 리얼리즘으로 갈 가능성은 없는가 하는 그런 문제를 좀 물어보고 싶습니다. 만일 미국과 중국 간의 관계가 지금보다 조금 더 어려워진다면 한국 입장은 더욱 어려워질 수밖에 없습니다. 미국은 아시아 입장에서 본다면 어찌 보면 이제 역의 균형자, 오프쇼 밸런서라고 볼 수 있겠는데, 한국은 중국과 바로 이웃한 국가입니다. 한국이 느끼는 중국의 그 영향력은 미국이 생각하는 것보다 훨씬 심각하다, 이런 문제예요. 그리고 우리가 비록 한미동맹이 우리 안보의 골격이지만, 가장 그 초석이지만, 한중 관계의 그 갈수록 커지는 경제 관계를 우리 입장에서 결코 무시할 수 없기 때문에 이 한미 관계와 한중 관계를 조화시켜야 할 필요성이 우리에게는 매우 중요하다는 그런 얘기입니다. 그래서 이럴 경우에 금년 들어서 오바마 대통령도 그랬고 힐러리 클린턴 국무장관도 미국은 아시아에 대해서 그 컴프리헨시브 인게이지먼트를 하겠다, 포괄적 관여를 하겠다, 이렇게 선언을 했는데, 그때 말하는 그 인게이지의 의미가 정확히 무엇을 말하는가? 다시 말해서 중국과 좀 더 건설적인 관계를 만들겠다는 것인지, 아니면 중국에 대해서 조금 더 압박을 가해서 중국이 국제사회에 책임 있는 행위자로 행동하도록 만들겠다는 의미인지, 거기에 대한 의견을 좀 묻고 싶고, 그다음에 한국의 입장에서 이제 중국과의 그 관계가 중요하기 때문에 만일 한국이 중국과의 그 협력 네트워크를 확대하려고 하는 것에 대해서는 미국은 과연 어떤 시각을 갖고 있는가? 그리고 그것을 도와줄 정책이나 의향은 있는지, 거기에 대한 의견을 좀 듣고 싶습니다. 그 다음에 에반스 리뷰 대사님께는 여쭙고 싶은 게, 그 발표하신 기본 취지는 이제 한미 동맹이 고잉 글로벌 해야 되겠다. 다시 말해서 이제 한미 동맹이 한반도라는 지역적인 범위를 넘어서 글로벌 문제에서 좀 더 협력을 했으면 좋겠다 하는 그런 취지로 말씀하셨는데, 문제는 그 한국과 미국의 그 국가 이익 혹은 안보 문제에 있어서 우선순위가 같지 않다는 데 있습니다. 미국은 글로벌한 문제에서 이 중국도 다루고 비확산 문제도 다루는데 우선순위가 있겠지만, 한국은 지금 당장 한반도 문제가 우선이고, 그 다음에 남는 여력을 가지고 글로벌 문제에 협력할 수밖에 없는 그런 상황입니다. 그렇기 때문에 미국이 만일 한국에 고잉 글로벌 하자고 요구를 했을 때, 그 미국이 만족할 만한 그 한국의 국제 문제 참여 수준은 어느 정도인가? 다시 말해서 한국이 남북 문제를 도외시한 채 국제 문제 리소스를 먼저 배당할 수는 없는 그런 상황이 우리 특징입니다. 거기에 대한 의견을 여쭙고 싶습니다. 이상입니다.
Because there are so many questions to three presenters, I am sure they like to answer all of them, but I would like to have some questions from the floor. So if the three presenters just limit their response to 5 minutes, then that will be very helpful. Victor.
Several comments. The first is that when we talk about actions to try to persuade or pressure China to do more, I don't, as opposed to working with China, I think that's not the right framework. That's not the right way to think about it. because I think all the actions that the United States and its allies have taken recently have not been taken to pressure China. All the actions, the trilateral meeting in Washington, the increased exercising, the Yellow Sea exercises are all actions that are taken among treaty allies in response to North Korean threats. That's the purpose of it. And then people then make arguments that China may not like that, so they should try to work harder on solving the North Korea problem. That may be the case, but that is certainly the intention, I think, of all of these actions is to try to deal with the existential threat from North Korea. It is not meant to pressure China. If anything, I think all three countries want to work with China to try to create an opening in terms of dealing with North Korea. That's the first point. The second is, when will China do this? My own view is China is not going to do this because the United States or South Korea ask them to. China will only do this when it feels that its interests are best served by doing this. Now, how they calculate their interests is nothing that we can predict. But there will have to come a point where China sees that its interests in trying to persuade, coerce, whatever it is, North Korea to come back to negotiations and to cease provocations, they have to see that as being in their both short-term and long-term interests. And that is when they will shift their policy. It won't be because we or the ROK or anybody else asks them to. Now, on the policy-making side, often you see, and Evans and others, Kim Hyung-jin and Admiral Weisskopf and others at this table know very well that often a good opportunity, policy-wise, to try to affect change is when you have a leader, a summit. And you know, there is this upcoming summit of Hu Jintao coming to the United States. This is what is often referred to as an action-forcing event. It's a big event where you want to try to make accomplishments. Both sides have incentives in trying to show cooperation in advance of the visit. I could be wrong, but the signals right now are not very positive that I read. And then, in fact, it doesn't look like we're headed to any sort of great compromise or big deliverables coming out of this visit. Having said that, it's still early. We're still a ways away, and things could happen in advance of the meeting. The other thing I would say on China is that something I didn't talk about in my presentation, but my friends who are real China experts tell me is that, you know, just as 2012 is an important date in North Korea, in the United States, in South Korea, for all the reasons we know why, it's an important date in China as well. And the leadership transition in 2012 for the Chinese almost ensures institutionally that there will not be drastic changes or drastic deviations from essentially traditional and conservative policy among decision makers in China. There's absolutely no incentive to try to step outside the box and say, well, you know, I think we should completely change our policy towards North Korea. And that's a domestic constraint on China's policy. And then the last thing I would say is I think what adds to the difficulty of cooperation between the United States and China today is something that several of the discussants referred to, and that is Chinese views of the United States. Because we, on the one hand, see China as being more muscular now, you know, refusing to cooperate on North Korea, advancements on the Senkaku Islands, advancements in the South China Sea, and we tend to see this as a more muscular and defiant Chinese policy, you know, potentially offensive, realist. But from China's perspectives, they see the United States in a completely different light. They see U.S. complaints as really being the manifestation of a declining power that is financially hollowed out, that is looking to China to solve America's financial problems. So in many ways, there's a completely different picture from which the Chinese are viewing U.S. complaints or so-called U.S. pressure. And that's I think we're kind of locked into this cycle right now, and that's one of the reasons why I think it's been so difficult.
Yes, I think the questions can be grouped into two things. One is the instability in the North. Second issue, how we are going to upgrade our defense posture to deter North Korea's further provocation and aggression. About this political stability or instability in the North, I think if you compare the situation from 94 to 97, maybe the current situation in terms of economy is a little bit better. Of course, this over the years, actually, North Korean economy has improved, and also maybe there's a possibility that trends can be reversed into the future. Of course, that's what Joseon-ilbo detected. So this, and also there's more information influx in the North. But if you take a look at the Cuban case, actually Cuba was infiltrated by information and the capitals, but actually still Cuba is still there. So maybe because of that, the durability of North Korean regime should not be underestimated, because this is quite politicized society and politicized regime. So of course there's a hardcore elite group who has a huge vested interest in sustaining the system. So of course I see some increasing number of instability, but that does not necessarily mean that now North Korea has entered into a stage of erosion or something like that. So you should be very careful about it, of course, but we do not want any kind of instability, but if there should happen, we should be able to handle the situation. That's the point, actually. So, of course, I illustrate economic problems in the North and social problems in the North. All the number of refugees has increased tremendously over the past couple of months. So, but I think we should be a little bit more patient in expecting or judging about the North Korean situation, because we have to understand the region characteristics in estimating, judging the North Korean. About the defense posture, of course, I'm not a military specialist, but I don't know details, but actually I think we need a kind of more full spectrum dominance in handling North Korean the threats. Because actually nowadays what we are talking about is kind of massive retaliation. But I have to ask a question, are we ready to handle the consequences after that? What if North Korea retaliate again? And then are we ready to go into the next step? In order to handle this kind of phased escalation, we should be able to dominantly control the situation. So it requires huge financial resources and also people's understanding for spending the financial resources on those sectors. So I think that's why I said about we have to take a look at the fundamentals of defense, and also we should be very imaginative in thinking what North Korea will do, we shall do in case of such situation. So the imagination should be there. So we have to start in North Korean way of thinking, North Korean way of strategy, North Korean way of using their forces for various purposes. So resoluteness should be accompanied by real action. Unfortunately, you know what happened just right after the Cheonan incident. 24th of May, 3 ministers got together, announced the measures. Still the valid measures actually were coming from the unification ministry. So we have been delayed because of all the possible consequences after taking the measures. So I think that there should be parallel between the actions and words. Otherwise, credibility, our stern response or retaliation would not work at all. So we have to increase our own credibility by narrowing the gap between the action and words. That's my point. So, and then maybe, but actually, we don't want to live like Israelis. Do you want to invest in Israel where kinds of constant provocation, escalation of the situation? We want to stabilize the situation. So from that regard, we need a cooperation from other countries. Chinese positive response on that. Of course, we can jeopardize Chinese interests by staging unstable situation in the periphery. But that's not a very negative way in approaching China. But I'm sure China has its own dilemma in handling North Korea. Instead of pressing China to one corner, we have to have But I'm sure there will be an ongoing dialogue between all the concerned parties. Fundamentals of these North Korea questions, we have to ask North Korea questions in bigger picture, and also we have to ask questions about East Asia cooperation mechanisms and the way to achieve that goal in the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A number of these questions were thrown my way, and I only have 4 or 5 minutes, so I will speak at New York speed. On this issue of soft power, let me just make it clear to this audience that I am in no way, shape, or form suggesting that soft power is a substitute for hard power. It is not. One of the major points I wanted to make is that we should not forget about the value and benefits of soft power, even as we pursue the accretion of hard power in dealing with North Korea and other challenges. There is no substitute for, in dealing with North Korea and dealing with provocations and challenges, there's no substitute for hard power, a strong deterrent, and very clear indications from South Korea about what it is prepared to do in response to future provocations. Having said that, there is something that can be done in terms of the use of South Korea's soft power in dealing with the North. The very existence of the Republic of Korea is a powerful weapon in dealing with North Korea. The very existence of a thriving economy, a thriving democracy, is something that on any given day of the week probably drives the North Korean leadership crazy. And so the more that you can get your message out about your economic and democratic and other successes here, whether it's turning on loudspeakers, whether it's dropping in cell phones, whether it's increasing your radio broadcasts, whether it's providing support for defectors and refugees from North Koreans here, and having the news of their success in your society get back up north, those are all very powerful weapons that can be used in terms of exercising your soft power. In addition to that, another mechanism that I think is valuable to use here is keeping the pressure on North Korea in international fora, whether it's in the UN Security Council, whether it's in international human rights organizations, etc. Keep the pressure on North Korea so that they understand that they are on the losing side of history and on the losing side of the debate in so many of these issues. The question of Japan came up, and I'm very glad that was brought up because Japan is another critical player in all of this. And both the Cheonan attack and the attack on Yeonpyeong were a real wake-up call to the Japanese government and Japanese people, who had already been woken up, by the way, by exercises that the PLA Navy had been conducting near Japanese territorial waters. There is a growing awareness on the part of this new, well, maybe not so new, DPJ government in Tokyo now, of the need to move in a more pragmatic and maybe even hard-nosed direction when it comes to dealing with threats to regional security and the ongoing shift in power relations in the region. And you see this being manifested in very interesting ways in changing Japanese defense plans, and that, I think, is a good thing. On the question of how do we get the message through to the Chinese that they have miscalculated, whether it's in dealing with South Korea in terms of the Cheonan and Yeonpyeong-do, whether it's in terms of dealing with other issues that have come up in the region over the last several months. My sense is that the message is already being carefully transmitted to the Chinese in various ways, including, to say the least, President Obama's phone call to Hu Jintao the other day, which laid down, I think, some very clear markers about expectations and hopes that the United States has that China will use its influence in a more positive way. In recent conferences, a number of us have noticed that the Chinese participants in those conferences are adopting a much more defensive tone about all of these issues when these concerns are expressed to them about the way that they've handled or mishandled the Cheonan and other incidents, and that's a good thing. As Victor pointed out, the U.S., Japan, South Korea cooperation is not directed at China. It's very clearly directed at North Korea. But the message is not lost on Beijing that as a result of the failings of its policy and as a result of the provocations of North Korea, we have an emerging new situation in terms of U.S., Korea, Japan cooperation here, and that's a good thing. If you have not read the statement that came out of the trilateral foreign ministers meeting the other day, you should read it. It is really a seminal document in talking about a new set of relationships that are forming in this region among the United States and its two key allies in the region. Let me wrap up by just noting that on this question of counterproliferation, the simple answer to your question, Abe, is that yes, we failed. We failed in preventing North Korea from building or beginning to build a reactor facility in Syria. Fortunately, the Israeli Air Force was very helpful in rectifying our errors. But I think the message from all of this is that we need to ensure that we establish clear and credible red lines in dealing with future acts of North Korean proliferation. The emphasis is on credible. It is one thing to say, we will do X if you will do Y, but if you do not do X if the other party does Y, then the other party draws some conclusions from that. And I think, unfortunately, certain habits have been developed on the part of North Korea in which they have been, this sort of learned behavior that they have followed for the last few years is that we are not prepared to draw clear and credible red lines, and as a result, we are facing the challenges that we're facing today. Thank you.
감사합니다. 지금 저희가 오찬 연설이 12시 10분부터 시작해야 되고 그래서 좀 이동 시간이 있기 때문에 12시에 꼭 끝내야 됩니다. 그래서 제가 약속을 했기 때문에 저기 오신 청중께서 한 질문을 두세 개만 짧게 연달아서 받겠습니다. 그리고 말씀을 하실 때는 저희 여기 패널리스트 어느 분께 아니면 모두에게 질문을 하는지 말씀해 주시고요. 그 다음에 그렇게 진행하면 좀 손을 들면 저희 스태프들이 마이크를 가지고 이동할 것입니다. 네, 여기.
Difficulties, but only because they have difficulties forming internal consensus. And I posit that there are many different ideas, but at least three main. The think tankers who think this is ridiculous. Why are we being pulled around by that little tiny tail? Let's do things which is to our own interest. And there are many interests, the intellects who put those things, the internet, etc. And then I see also the civilian governments, Hu Jintao, Wen Jiabao, etc., acting more rationally at the beginning. And then there are third factors which eventually triumphs over all these guys and trumps. Those are, I think, primarily, I believe, is military type old-liners. Let me take the example. For example, when the Cheonam sank, Wen Jiabao said we will not be blindly one-sided to support. These were the rational statements. But then toward the end, they said they would not even meet with the Korean diplomat to see the evidence. Now, I believe, why did they change? They were forced to change. And recently, the diplomatic problems, Senkakto, Dawei, Do, etc., highly irrational act in their part. And I think there is also a drive.
질문만 짧게.
네. The question, therefore, is, as Dr. Denmark said, the issue of dealing with China is, mine is not really a question, it's a comment. The issue is not what we can do. We have to wait what China is ready. And in so doing, we probably have to be more cognizant of their internal dynamics and therefore do not push what we want just one-sidedly. And I think this probably was the same thing with the exchange rate, etc. And finally, I'd like to add one comment on Evans Revere. And in fact, somebody questioned whether Korea can offer enough alliance to the value to the United States. I think we offer tremendous value to the United States. Because the United States is in history a very unique country. We never had this thing. But what U.S. did with Korea also ranks a very unique experience in the history because it never happened this kind of tremendous accomplishment in a short period of time. And therefore, U.S. working with Korea will offer tremendous value in our future software and hardware combined development. Thank you.
세 가지 스테이지에서 이번 스테이지는 현재 현황을 더서 분석하고자 하는 노력들로 이해되는데요. 한미동맹 관계는 국제적인 관계, 국가적 그리고 내셔널 레벨 두 가지 레벨을 주로 많이 거론한 것 같은데 저는 지방 정부에 있는 그 관료로서 지방 레벨 또는 시민과의 관계 레벨을 결코 무시해서는 안 된다라는 말씀을 드리고 싶습니다. 지금 현재 한국의 시민들과 주둔하고 있는 미군들의 관계는 그렇게 호의적인 관계는 아닌 것 같습니다. 오늘 이 자리에서 한미동맹의 미래를 규명하는 자리에 있어서 그 지역 레벨, 로컬 레벨이나 또는 시티즌스과의 관계에 대해서도 규명을 해야 논의를 하고 발전을 모색해야 되지 않느냐라는 질문을 하고 싶습니다.
I would agree with the comment that there needs to be no country can blindly push China to try to do things that they don't want to do. It's always going to be a combination of that and the internal dynamics that are taking place in China. I agree with that.
지방 정부, 시민과 그 중앙 정부 그리고 사실은 미국 이렇게 3자 간의 관계가 굉장히 중요한 것 같습니다. 그래서 그걸 균형되게 발전해야 되는데 그 과정에서 뭐 불편한 점도 있고 아마 그 소통의 문제도 있을 거라고 생각합니다. 그래서 어떤 문제 그 지방 정부와 중앙 정부, 미국 정부 그리고 미군 어떻게 이 4자 간의 협의를 앞으로 더 활성화할 필요성이 충분히 있다고 보고 그것이야말로 동맹을 가장 반석 위에 올려놓는 좋은 길이라고 생각합니다. 그 점에서는 저도 충분히 공감을 하고요. 사실 그 평택 오산 이전하는 과정에서 총리실이 좀 그런 역할을 좀 했는데 요즘에 와서는 좀 그런 것이 좀 줄어들었다라는 것이 좀 아쉽습니다. 그래서 이 지금 과정에서도 지금 기지가 이전돼가는 과정에서도 그런 것이 좀 더 다시 중앙정부 차원에서 다시 노력이 되고 리바이벌 했으면 하는 것이 저도 개인적인 그 생각입니다. 감사합니다.
Quick comments. I just realized that one of the commentators had a question about the globalization of our alliance and what the United States was, I believe the word he used was demanding of Korea. The answer to that is nothing. My own sense is that the United States is reacting to Korea's interest in participating in a broader globalized alliance relationship, and to that degree the United States, I believe, is very receptive to that. The main mission here, as I tried to say in my earlier remarks, remains the defense of the Republic of Korea and dealing with the challenge of North Korea. Other missions beyond that, we, the United States, I think, are very receptive to whatever the Republic of Korea is prepared to do beyond that. But it is the Republic of Korea's decision as to what it wants and needs beyond the Korean Peninsula and what it's prepared to do and what assets it's prepared to bring to bear. So this is not a sense of American pressure on South Korea to move in a more globalized direction, but rather American receptiveness to Korea's interest in that. Just one thing on China. I've been spending a lot of time in Beijing and talking with Chinese friends about why they are doing what they are doing with respect to North Korea. The picture that I'm beginning to paint of what's happening up there is that the leadership in Beijing has made a decision, and made this decision probably about a year or so ago, that the emerging new leadership in North Korea, a new strata of younger people, some of them educated overseas, but certainly younger people, that this new strata of leadership is, in the minds of Beijing, worth courting and worth investing in, because these people, in the minds of the Chinese, have the potential to bring about the change, economic and other change in North Korea, that the Chinese have been pushing the North Koreans to make for the last 30 years or so. Now, I don't buy that. I don't accept that that is exactly where this new leadership strata is going to take North Korea. But it is a strongly held view in certain quarters in Beijing that the time may finally have come that the Chinese will be able to get their message through to the North Koreans, and that the North Koreans will accept the message that Chinese-style economic reform is the only way to go. As I said to a Chinese colleague at a meeting recently after having him spell out this game plan about the North, I said, I hope you're right, but I'm convinced you're wrong.
한미동맹이 어떻게 좀 국제적으로 공헌하고 그런 논의가 많았었는데요. 이렇게 최근에 남북한 관계가 굉장히 어렵게 되면서 그런 논의가 힘을 받기 좀 어렵게 된 것 같아요. 그러다 두 역할에 어떤 분업 관계가 일어나야 될 것이고 거기에 대해서 한국 정부와 한국 시민들이 더 많은 고민을 해야 되게 그런 시점에 온 게 된 것 같습니다. 감사합니다.